Hi Laurence, welcome to the Hayakshi program.
Hi Amin, thank you very much for inviting me on your show.
I would like to introduce you to our audience. Laurence Broers is Associate Fellow of Russia-Eurasia program at Chatham House. Laurence, we as Restart Initiative, and I would like to say this is not, I'm not journalist, it's not journalistic program, so this is just conversation. And I like to invite people who are professionals and know their field very well to discuss these various topics. And today, of course, the topic I would like to start with asking your opinion about how you see the challenges of economic connectivity in Armenia-Azerbaijan dialogue. I know that economic connectivity was the topic that was not really in the agenda of Armenia-Azerbaijan dialogue for the last 30 years. There was strong resistance, I think, from Azerbaijani side even to be engaged in such discussions or debates. But after the Second Karabakh War, Azerbaijan changed its opinion. So in fact, there is these discussions even on, on the level of heads of states, on the level of prime ministers, deputy prime ministers, ministers. But for me, it's interesting. Do you think economic connectivity can help this dialogue? Do you think, what are the challenges of navigating this topic in this Armenian-Azerbaijan dialogue, in your opinion?
Sure. Well, I think you're absolutely right. For decades, the subject of economic connectivity and reciprocal interests in connectivity was not on the peace-building agenda. That changed with the Second Karabakh War. And in fact, I would say that economic connectivity has been the principal theatre or paradigm through which, particularly at the elite level, confidence building has been discussed. So that started, I think, in the aftermath of the Second Karabakh War, and I think it's been very powerfully reinforced by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which has obviously highlighted the question of future transit routes, connectivity and transportation that would connect East and West, avoiding Russia. So I think we have this kind of double push and impetus to have this discussion. And obviously the absence of connectivity, the proliferation of blockades, of front lines, lines of contact in the South Caucasus has kept this region very much fractured and has been a key factor in slowing down the emergence of a viable regional consciousness and the utility of a regional identity in the South Caucasus. In terms of how it could be navigated and what the risks and opportunities are, I think there would be a risk if connectivity is presented as the only or the primary peace-building methodology or strategy on its own. So for example, just to kind of illustrate that, in my visits to Azerbaijan since the Second Karabakh War, more than once I've heard this analogy with the European Union, that the European Union is basically an economic union, and it started out as an economic union and then built up into this very powerful peace-building project to end wars in Europe. So that is cited as an example of where the connectivity agenda could lead for the South Caucasus. And I do agree that this connectivity perspective opens up forward-looking horizons that are crucial. But I think you can arrive at a kind of transactional basis for relations, but the European Union is not only an economic union, it is also a community that is built on a consensus around certain historical events and specifically memories. And so I think the impact of connectivity in the South Caucasus would be quite limited if it is only about establishing certain transit routes and so on in isolation from a broader project to address issues of trust, issues of fear, issues of insecurity. To sum up, connectivity really offers important forward-looking perspectives, but I think it needs to be seen as part of a much broader package that would address identities and would allow for relations of trust and not just transactionality in relations. And just to add to that, there are many examples of enduring conflicts where there is a degree of economic interdependency and connectivity. If you look at India and Pakistan, for instance, if you look at Israel and Palestine, a high degree of economic connectivity, or the interdependency is a bit more fraught there because it's very asymmetric. But look at the Russia-Europe energy relationship. Interdependency there as a peace building or as a relationship management mechanism didn't work. So when we're talking about future connectivity, I think the risk is it shouldn't be unisectoral. We need a multi-dimensional, networked connectivity that also bridges into connecting memories, reconciling memories. Without that, it will still be a securitized connectivity, very vulnerable to future episodes of escalation and violence.
From what we observe in this process of in this peace process that is currently underway with EU mediation, with Russian mediation, I see that I can't resist to see a certain irony that Russia and EU, which are maybe it's a war or a Cold War. I mean, they basically don't even talk to each other. It's a situation where they cannot mediate currently between themselves. But we have a situation where this conflict is being mediated by Russia on the one hand and by the EU on the other hand. How do you see, and Russia's interest coming to economic connectivity, it seems the experts agree that Russia is not interested in resolving this conflict, rather than, because then it will have to take its troops at least, out from Azerbaijan, and will have to, is interested in some kind of connectivity, like opening communication lines, starting trade between Azerbaijan and Armenia, using this space for its own trade and business interests, but is not really interested in solving the conflict. On the other hand, we have EU, we have France, which is also another question, how much France's position actually is helping currently or not. But it is, the EU and Russia's mediation are at conflict with each other, or is it not at conflict? How do you see this situation with mediators who cannot mediate between themselves but are helping us in the South Caucasus to mediate this conflict?
Yeah, it is really such a fragmented and chaotic context in many ways. The situation that we have today, I think, does remind me of the situation that existed in the mid-90s, a period that I would characterize as one of fractured mediations, where, if you remember, at that time, the then Conference for Security and Cooperation in Europe was mediating. Russia was also putting forward proposals. During the war, Iran had its own mediation initiative, and Kazakhstan was also involved together with Boris Yeltsin at Zheleznovodsk. So really a multiplicity of different mediation initiatives. And eventually this was resolved through the mechanism of the co-chairs of the Minsk Group. So the Minsk Group was a solution of sorts, to that problem of fractured mediations. So today, I think, again, as you highlighted, we have these multiple mediation efforts mediating on many of the same issues with different emphases. And it is a question to what extent can any single one of these mediation initiatives succeed without being embedded in a comprehensive process. So I think all of the mediators face what you might call a competitive mediator's dilemma, that they may be able to achieve agreements or move the process forward on some particular set of issues, but that progress can be challenged by another mediator as geopolitical interference or unilateralism or whatever it is. And so this is a key issue. How can these different threads be woven back into a unifying and comprehensive process? And a lot obviously depends on Armenia and Azerbaijan themselves. You know, I think it's an interesting question. I think Armenia and Azerbaijan certainly have more agency as actors in this process, particularly the case for Azerbaijan. So, you know, whether these processes succeed depend on the extent to which the negotiating parties engage, for example, in forum shopping, trying to get a better deal with another mediator. And I guess it also depends on their own vision for the region. I mean, this is very speculative, but I think we do potentially see a zone of implicit agreement between Yerevan and Baku that they want a region that is less subject to external interference and particularly securitized influence. So when we look at, as you highlighted, Russia does have a stake in connectivity. The Lachin corridor is under the jurisdiction, under the control of the peacekeeping mission. The route across southern Armenia would, as per the ceasefire statement, be under the control of the Russian security forces. So there is an interest for Russia, in a sense, to reassert itself through control over these still very securitized transit routes. So the question, I think, for Yerevan and Baku is to what extent do they really want that outcome? And coming back to your question about connectivity, you know, what is the alternative and a really a more optimistic, connected future for the region? Perhaps they're working in concert to edge Russia out of this process. So yeah, it's a very difficult context, but I think the fact that we have these competing mediation efforts from powers who are at conflict elsewhere does highlight the continued utility and value of the OSCE as a regional security organization, which all the players are members. So, you know, whether or not we're talking about the Minsk group, I think we should not exclude or write off a future role for the OSCE.
I would like also to use this opportunity to ask you about the recent developments in Azerbaijani identity, because I know you wrote article about it with your colleague, and but it was before you wrote this article, I know, before the Second Karabakh War, and it was published recently. But you were in Baku. We are all observing very interesting developments in Azerbaijan when President Aliyev started at this summit of heads of Turkic states, telling things that he was never telling before about Azerbaijanis living in Iran. You know, before you would see, you know, I remember Elchibey, one of the former Azerbaijani presidents in the 90s, he was using this rhetoric, you know, appealing that Azerbaijan is a bigger nation and there are tens of millions of Azerbaijanis living in Iran, which is, by the way, very much contested. You know, how many Azerbaijanis living in Iran? What President Aliyev said is 40 million Azerbaijanis living in Iran, and your rights are violated, and it has been also done in the context of escalation of, you know, Azerbaijan's relationship with Iran because of Zangezur corridor, because of this ongoing also peace negotiations with Armenia. I would like you to tell us a little bit about how do you see the development of Azerbaijan identity is after the Second Karabakh War.
Well, yes, you mentioned an article which I co-authored with Ceyhun Mahmoudlu, who's now in the United States. We wrote that article in 2016, and for various reasons it wasn't published until this year. So it covers the first 25 years. And we were focusing on this notion of Azerbaijanism, which, as you know, is the official state doctrine, and was very much focused on an ostensibly civic sense of nationalism, defining the Azerbaijani nation as the citizens of the Republic of Azerbaijan, rather than an ethnic or ethno-nationalist definition of the Azerbaijani nation, which would encompass ethnic Azerbaijanis, as you mentioned, living in Iran, but also potentially those living in Kvemokartli in Georgia. So I think in our article we suggested that while this inclusive civic identity has been the mainstream or the focus, there's always been this kind of exceptionality with regard to the Karabakh conflict and with regard to the ethnic Armenian population, which seemingly does not have a place in Azerbaijanism, formally, rhetorically, of course, but in practice. And I think that touches on, you know, these very important kind of current debates as to, you know, what is the future trajectory for the Armenian population of Karabakh vis-a-vis the Azerbaijani state and Azerbaijani nationalism. And I think, you know, Azerbaijanism potentially offered a framework that was more inclusive. But I think what we're seeing is a pivot away from the sort of core principles or practices of Azerbaijanism towards a more ethno-nationalist understanding. So as you mentioned, there is you know, much more focus and rhetoric focused on ethnic Azerbaijanis abroad as being part of a single political community with the Republic of Azerbaijan. So I think this is enormously significant, and it is also in many ways ironic. Azerbaijan has suffered from irredentism, and now it seems to be experimenting with irredentism of its own. And irredentism is typically an ethnic ideology that is punished in a world of states. So I think there's a lot of risks involved in that. So yes, I'm watching these developments with a sense of
yeah, it is ironic because I compare, let's say, Armenian irredentism with Azerbaijani irredentism, and the difference right now is, I mean, you are right that it seems now that, you know, Azerbaijan is experimenting with it. In Armenia it's different. It is part of constitution. It is part of their legal system, their claim on the territory of another state. For Azerbaijan right now, if I understand correctly, I mean, President Aliyev did not claim that part of Iran as part of Azerbaijan yet. But for the first time, in the presence of Erdogan and other heads of Turkic states, he said something that he has never said before, that 40 million Azerbaijanis are living, their rights are discriminated. in a context that was happening, these military exercises of Iran on the border with Azerbaijan, and I think it's also a threat, you know, like you're threatening us, we're threatening you back. And we can do it even more. And it's not just Azerbaijan, we are saying is in the framework of all Turkic states, because, you know, we have similar language, it's, you know, ethnicities that are close to each other, and states that are now building a strong and wider union. So I don't think, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, that it has been now officially adopted in Azerbaijan, like the way in Armenia, like we are claiming part of Iran. No, it was just, for now at least, even if rhetoric on TV was unbelievable, you know, like even on weather program, like they were like in Tebri, like, you know, like this was a great theater directed at Iran as answer to very aggressive rhetoric coming from Iran. I have a feeling it is, for now, it's a little bit experimentation. You have threatened us, we're threatening you back. We have something that you don't want even us to start to develop this discourse about. Or do you think it's now Azerbaijan charted towards, because also, you know, this rhetoric in Azerbaijani government media is like very anti-Russian, very anti-Iranian, to a degree that nobody has ever witnessed since Heydar Aliyev and Ilham Aliyev have been in power. Never. Has been always diplomatic, very polite. Nothing like that now. And I'm sometimes thinking maybe there are, like, you know, something is going to happen in Iran. Like, is this like some bigger, I don't want to go into conspirology now, but it seems to me like is very powerful change in rhetoric, but it is not official policy yet, you know, irredentism and claim of, or do you think?
No, I'm not suggesting that it's an official policy. You know, we're not there. But as you mentioned, I think there has been an unprecedented escalation in the visibility and presence of irredentist tropes and language at the level of the political elite in Azerbaijan that I have not seen before under this government. So as you mentioned, this is taking place in the context of, you know, newly tense relations with Iran, newly securitized relationship with Iran that's been ongoing since 2020, and there are also territorially integrationist tropes and rhetoric moving around in Iran. You know, make Azerbaijan Iran again. This kind of, you know, stuff. And I think, you know, we shouldn't overestimate the significance of this. This is, as you say, a kind of rhetorical posturing for now, but I think it is dangerous because often these symbolic attachments and evocations of territorial nostalgia can become real social forces. We've seen that in the Armenian-Azerbaijani context. I think this is also, you know, an ongoing process with regard to, you know, the foregrounding of what I would call a kind of a new territorial brand of Zangezur for Azerbaijan. And this is, this, it seems, I call it this irresistible irredentist imagination. That is something that is...
imagining new, bigger community.
Yeah. So augmented Armenia, augmented Azerbaijan. Why are these ethno-territorialist imaginations so powerful? And I think part of the answer is a truncated sense of citizenship. That, you know, when your citizenship within the republic, within the body politic to which you belong is somehow truncated, then it can become an alternative to a fuller sense of citizenship, that you start to project a sense of identity and belonging on territories beyond your republic. So So yes, I think this is a worrisome tendency, and I hope that the relevant authorities will exercise caution and not go down any further this irredentist path.
Laurence, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming to our studio, answering my questions. This is our first interview, but I hope not the last, and from time to time we can talk in person or online about these developments in Armenia-Azerbaijan dialogue, but also in the issues that is you are now academically have been involved with, researching and exploring the depths and widths of the Azerbaijani identity.
Thank you very much, Emin. Thank you.
You.